For the past month, Tara and I have been living full-time on the road in the truck camper and relying solely on the Jackery Explorer 1000 to feed our energy needs and these two SolarSaga 100 watt panels to feed energy from the sun to the Jackery. We've really gotten a chance to know it in and out, and we've relied on it every day. We have no backup plan. So I feel like we're in a good spot to make a full review on this Jackery and tell you the ups and downs of it, why we like it, and a few reasons why we don't. Currently, we're camping in the beautiful New Mexican desert near Las Cruces, and these are the Oregon mountains behind me. What better place to do a review? It's beautiful out here right now. One quick thing before I start this video, if you're looking for detailed information and specs on the panels or the Explorer unit, check out my other video up here, I'll link it. That video describes all the details and gives a brief overview of my first impressions of it, but today's video is going to be a full-on review. Also, stick around to the end of the video because Jackery is getting ready to do a big sale on these, so if you're thinking about picking up either the panels or the unit or both, now's a great time to do so, and I'll tell you why at the end of the video. And just so you know, I did reach out to Jackery to send me these units to review, but as with all of my videos, I have no reason to support Jackery or encourage you to buy them if I don't truly believe it's a great product, so I'm going to be 100% honest with you about everything. Let's get into the review. So before we get into the nitty-gritty pros and cons of the solar panels and the Explorer unit, I wanted to share how we use the Jackery in the camper, just to give you an idea of what our use case is, and you can see how that relates to what you may be using it for. In the camper, I have this Jackery plugged into a DC fuse box to distribute the power throughout the camper. If you want to see how that's set up, I've got a video I made on that very process that I'll link up here to check out. But basically, this Jackery powers all of our house systems, and we also plug into the Jackery to power various devices. Now, we use a pretty diverse group of devices on this, so I figured I would list them out for you. First off, we're charging 2 cell phones, an iPad, a laptop computer, 3 digital cameras that we use to make these videos. Then wired into the Jackery, we have the Max Air fan that sits on top of the camper, which gives us a nice breeze when we need it. We have the diesel heater, so when it's cold like it will be tonight, we run the diesel heater just to give us a little heat before we go to bed. And we also run the Dometic fridge 24/7 off of this Jackery too. On top of that, we cook with a 6-quart Instant Pot, and we run that through the AC inverter on the Jackery. So that's a lot of different power we're using, and obviously we're not using all of those devices at the same time, but throughout a single day or a week, we end up using all of those and charging almost all of our devices. And so far, the Jackery has proved more than capable of handling all of that, which is incredible. Let me outline some quick numbers just to give you an idea of how this whole system works together. So on a clear day like today, these 2 panels will charge the Jackery at around 130 watts, which in our experience has been more than enough to keep it topped off by the end of the day, pretty much no matter what percentage it's at. If it were at 0%, charging at 130 watts, it may take 7 to 8 hours, but we've never had it at 0% because even under extremely heavy use, the most we've brought it down to was probably 19%. And the next day we put out the panels, it was a sunny day, and they charged the Jackery completely up by the end of the day, and we had spare power. When you have sun, solar is no issue at all. These things charge it very fast. On cloudy days, the output of these 2 panels can really vary. It depends how cloudy it is. I've seen around 90 watts on like a partially cloudy day, and when it's really overcast, it can be as low as 20 watts. That said, so far on our journey, we've mostly had sunny days. There were times in Tennessee and Alabama where we did have clouds, but we still found that we had enough power to top off the battery despite being in cloudy weather. We do have days where we spend most of the day on the road driving in the car, and obviously on those days we can't set out the solar panels and they're not mounted to the roof or anything. But the cool thing with the Jackery is it can also be charged via 12 volt. So what we do is actually just tap into our car's 12 volt system, plug it into the Jackery, and that will charge the Jackery as we drive. So we don't have to worry about the solar in those cases, and we still top off the battery. So like I mentioned earlier, we have the Dometic fridge running full time on the Jackery. And most days we're charging our cell phones and we're using the lights in the camper. That's kind of our normal use case. And under those conditions, I'd say we use during the day maybe 15% of the battery at most without charging it up. And overnight around 12 to 15% of the battery, because the Dometic fridge is extremely efficient. So we're really not using a lot of the capacity of this battery under normal use cases. But there are times where we use this battery much more heavily, and that is primarily when we're running the Instant Pot. So the Instant Pot is AC only, so it plugs into this inverter and you have to turn the inverter on. It heats up the food inside to a boiling point where steam is generated, and then it traps that steam in there to cook everything under pressure. So the cool thing about that setup is you can cook mass amounts of food, and you can cook food that typically takes a long time to cook much faster and much more efficiently. The downside to that is that initial draw heating up that food uses a lot of wattage. So we've found that a typical Instant Pot cook uses around 20 to 25% of this battery. Now that may sound like a lot, and it is, but you got to keep in mind this is a 6-quart Instant Pot that we're using. So when we cook like that, we've made enough food in that Instant Pot to eat on for the next week, possibly 2 weeks. It's not something you do every single day, and even on those times where we did do that, we found that the next day we easily just put out the panels and the batteries topped off to 100% again, so it didn't really matter that we used that excess amount of energy. So that's our use case for the Jackery, and a few quick numbers on how we're using it. Let's get into the actual pros and cons of the Explorer and the SolarSaga panels. And if you have any questions about how we use it or how you want to use it, leave them in the comments below and we'll do our best to get back with you and have an answer for you. For the Explorer 1000 unit, the pros are, first off, it's just stupid simple to use. You don't have to know any complex numbers. You don't have to build this system out in your camper. You literally just plug and play and you have the power you need. And I really like that about this. When I was researching the solar options for the truck camper, there are so many options out there and so many parts that you have to piece together, and it takes up a lot of room in the camper, and it's permanently mounted. This thing just slides into the camper, plugs into the fuse box, and we have power, and it's easy to use. It's got all of the different devices inside of it, so I don't have to worry about compatibility or layout or permanently mounting any of that into the camper, and that's really cool. And speaking of that portability, I think that's another huge pro of this unit. It's 22 pounds, so when we need to move it, we can move it. We can take it out of the truck camper, bring it inside a friend's house to charge, or bring it outside to charge our devices while we're out there next to it. There's just so many options that the portability opens up, and it's really nice to have that option and not have to worry about this being permanently mounted in the camper. Another big pro for me is the multiple charging options. So we've been out for a month now, but we've already used all 3 charging options on the Jackery with great success, and it's proven its kind of adaptability in that way. Obviously, we use solar most days, like today, to charge the Jackery up. When we're driving in the car all day, we use the 12-volt adapter to charge it, and that's been great. And there are other times where we have shore power or access to AC power, like at a campground we had in Louisiana, and in that case, we can just plug in the Jackery with its AC adapter and charge it that way. And all 3 of those ways work great, and the cool thing is it has pass-through power, which is another huge pro. As it's being charged, we can siphon some of that charging power off and use it to power our devices. On a typical day in the camper, the solar panels live outside of the truck camper in the sun, and they plug into the side of the truck camper, and that wire runs into the inside where the Jackery is, and it's charging the Jackery. Meanwhile, we're using devices, we're charging our phones, we're running the fridge at the same time. So we're charging and using power, and that is a huge pro of this unit. There are other units that do that, but there are some that don't. And I would strongly advise you, if you're looking at any sort of power unit, make sure you get one that does pass-through charging. Another thing I like are the front-facing ports. So although there is a rear to this unit, there's nothing on the rear. Everything you need to access is on the front. So when we need to plug the solar in, it typically stays plugged in, but it's up there if we need to unplug it and move it. The 12-volt adapter plugs in right up front. When we need to charge our phones, we either plug into a port that we've wired into the camper or just plug straight into the Jackery. It's really simple and easy. And we can also use the AC ports on the front when we use the Instant Pot and just set it right inside the camper. And I'd say the final pro of this unit, although there are many others I'm probably not mentioning, is that it has enough power to run the Instant Pot. That was a big thing for us. We wanted to be able to get off of propane gas, and for the most part we don't use propane at all. We sometimes use our backpacking stoves to cook oatmeal and coffee or tea in the morning, but most of our cooking is done on the Instant Pot in bulk. So we cook once in the Instant Pot and we have our meals for the week or the next 2 weeks. Overall, I'd say I'm pretty impressed with how this handles the Instant Pot, and yeah, it uses 20 to 25% of the battery, but we're not using the Instant Pot that often, and we easily recover that amount with solar. And there have been times where we've taken the unit outside with the Instant Pot so we can cook outside and not have the cooking smells in the camper. And if you know the Instant Pot, you have to depressurize it so it blows off a lot of steam. And obviously that's not ideal in the camper, so being able to cook outside with this unit is ideal. All right, so that wraps up the pros. There are some cons of this unit too, so let's get into those. My first con with this unit is the noise that the cooling fan generates. So if you're only using DC, you're not gonna hear the fan at all, it just doesn't come on. But when you're using the AC inverter heavily, you'll hear, maybe you can hear it right now, it'll kick on. You'll hear that cooling fan kick on. Typically, if you're using very little power, it doesn't stay on. But if you're using something like the Instant Pot that's drawing very high wattage, you're gonna hear that fan on full time, and it's a little bit noisy. It could have been quieter, I feel like. Another con for me is the USB-C port. I was really hoping, and I mentioned this in my other video, that I could charge my laptop through this USB-C, but it's just not high enough wattage. It works well for an iPad or phones or something like that, but it'd be cool if it were a high enough wattage to charge my laptop. Just a small little complaint, but maybe in the future they could fix that. One big con we ran into the other day, which was a first for us, is the cold weather performance of this unit. On most days this is going to perform just fine, and it has so far down to 33 degrees. But we had one interesting circumstance where we were cooking with the Instant Pot. It was cold outside, probably 35 or something, and inside the camper is a little bit warmer. But we loaded up the Instant Pot with a big batch of curry. We used water, which was ice cold. We used vegetables and some other things out of the fridge, which were cold. The Instant Pot was using a ton of power to heat this ice cold mixture up to a steaming boiling point. And the Jackery was also using a ton of power because I think it was running a little bit less efficiently than normal because it was so cold. So on that cook, while a normal cook on the Instant Pot ran about 20 to 25% of our battery, we were using over 50% of our battery to make that curry. And that kind of made us nervous to use that much battery. Luckily, we started out around 100% or like 99 or something. So it wasn't a big deal, and the next day we recouped all of that energy with solar. But I think the combination of the Instant Pot having to heat up very cold food and the Jackery being a little less efficient in the cold with the lithium-ion batteries, I think that really kind of drained this battery super fast, and that could be a downside for some people that want to camp in purely cold weather. And finally, my last and biggest con for this unit is it's not expandable. If you look at the Goal Zero batteries, they're less ideal in some ways, but one really nice feature is you can daisy chain another battery to them and have access to that through all of the functions of the unit. This unit is completely self-contained, so you can't add another battery to it, you can't expand it. That said, it's more than handled all of our power needs, but it would be nice to have that peace of mind later down the road if we're using this for a different situation or if we somehow need more power in the camper. It would be really nice to have the option to daisy chain a battery onto the back of this thing. That wraps up the pros and cons of the Explorer 1000. Despite the cons, I think this unit is one of the best on the market, and this is a market that's seeing a lot of new products coming in. I think Jackery is a standout brand. It feels quality, it works well, and you don't really have to think about it, which is my biggest thing. It just sits in the camper, runs the fridge, takes in the power, puts out the power, and it's simple. Let's move on to the SolarSaga 100 watt panels. The first few pros are all kind of meshed together and related, but they're all tied into how compact and portable these panels are. As you see, they fold up into a briefcase design, which is super handy. We can store them in the back of the camper, we can store them behind our seats in the truck. Very easy to tuck away somewhere and compact. And then when we need them, they're very easy to put out. You just grab them by the handle, pull them out, unfold them, and set them out into the sun. It's also really nice that they fold up because they're then protected from anything that may scratch or fall on them when you store them away. In addition to that, the zippered pouch on the back of the panels is super handy for storing the cord in, and if you need to charge something straight off of the panel, and they do have a USB-C and a typical USB port, you can put whatever you're charging and the cable inside that zippered pouch to protect it. It's essential for keeping everything clutter-free because you can just put your adapters and your cords back there and tote them around with the panels, which makes them very easy to access when you do need to put the panels back out. Another thing that ties into the portability and ease of use is the built-in kickstand. And that thing is awesome. So it's just a little Velcro piece of hard plastic, it feels like, but it's been really nice because it gives you just enough adaptability to angle the panels perfectly perpendicular to the sun. There have been some times where the sun is really low angle and we needed to kind of prop the kickstand up on a rock or something to get that little bit of extra angle on the panels, but for the most part the kickstands put the panels right where they need to be, around 45 degrees, and they do have a little bit of adjustment depending on where the sun is exactly. I don't know if I would want any panels that didn't have kickstands now because it makes it so easy to adjust that angle and maximize your energy intake. My favorite pro of these panels is their adaptability. If these panels were mounted on top of the truck camper, they would be stuck in a flat position and they wouldn't be getting the optimum amount of solar input because they're not being angled at the right degree. On top of that, we wouldn't be able to park the truck camper in the shade and keep it cool, but still charge our solar panels. So having these mobile like this is really nice because first off, we can angle them towards the sun as the sun moves throughout the day, or if a tree is casting a shadow on the panels, we can move them and make sure that we optimize our energy input. And when it's an option, we can park the truck camper in the shade under a tree or something so it stays cool, we're not overheating, and then we can put the panels out in the sun so we're getting the best of both worlds with energy input and staying cool in the truck camper. To finish out the pros, I mean, they've provided more than enough power for us, so I guess that's a pro. And I think a final pro is the security that comes with them being so portable and compact. So when we're in a parking lot or in town or something, we can lock these away either in the cab of the truck or in the back of the camper. And because they're so small, they fit inside, and we don't have this huge target on us that says, hey, look, these people have solar panel and maybe more inside. So it's a little more secure, in my opinion, that way. I guess one more thing I could say that's a pro is these are pretty durable. I mean, we've been using them at the beach, in the sand. They've been covered in sand at one point, blown over by the wind. We're using them in desert now, and in cold and hot, and so far they've held up really well. Sometimes they get a little dusty, but we just take our little broom and dust them right off, and they seem to be holding up overall very well. And with that, let's get into the cons of the panels. Now, to be honest, I really couldn't find too many cons. I mean, they've just worked pretty well, but there are a few things that I think could be tweaked to better these panels in the future. My first con with the panels is the magnetic closure system. So when you fold these panels up like a briefcase, the two pieces of plastic have magnets in them that keep the panels shut. And at first, that was a really nice feature to me. It really worked well and kept them closed when you're transporting them. But over time, the panels with exposure to the sun, I think they tend to warp a little bit and find kind of a natural equilibrium. And when that happens, the panels don't sit flush, so they kind of rattle around a little bit. And sometimes I've been standing them up and they'll come undone. The panels just really need stronger magnets in there to hold them shut. So I think that could use some improvement, and it's not a big deal, but it would be nice to see that worked out. Another con for the panels is the cord on the back. It's a pretty durable and a nice cord, but it is hardwired into the panel. So if you tripped on the cord and pulled it out, or if you dropped a rock and cut the cord, you're kind of screwed, or you'd have to do the repair yourself to the cord, because there's not a plug-and-play option. Some panels have a port on the back and you plug in your preferred power cord into that port. That way, if the cord breaks or if it's cut, you can replace it, and that lets you choose what type of adapter you have on that cord, which is another bonus. And this kind of ties into my next con with these panels, which is that their cord uses an 8mm plug. Now, this isn't the most common plug in the solar world, so if you're using a unit other than the Jackery, you may find that it doesn't have an 8mm input for your solar panels to plug into. This isn't a huge deal because you can just get this adapter and use that, which has the Anderson power pole plug, which is kind of the universal plug that most of these power banks are using, but obviously that's not ideal. It'd be cooler if they just used the Anderson power pole plugs on the actual solar panel cords. If you're not completely within the Jackery ecosystem using their power stations and panels, it may be a stumbling point for you. All right, that wraps up the pros and cons for the panels. It's hard to explain how cool it is to get all of your energy from the sun. Every day we're using our devices and cameras and the fridge, and it's not coming from a grid, it's not coming from coal or anything, it's just coming from the sun that we collected the day before. And that's such a cool experience, and it's been a highlight of being on the road so far. So to wrap up the review, honestly, I'm super impressed with this gear. I mean, panels work very well, the Jackery works very well. It all just works so easily, and you don't have to think about it, which is huge when you're on the road and you have all these other things going on that you want to experience. Having something that just does what it needs to do and that you don't have to think about is clutch. So with that said, I have no qualms recommending this to anyone, but I would encourage you to think about what your power needs are. I think in our situation with the small truck camper and what we're doing, we don't use a lot of power, so this is more than enough for us, and it's an easy all-in-one plug-and-play solution, and I really like that for our situation. But that could be different for you. If you're in a much larger van or maybe an RV or something like that, you may need more power, or if you're using more devices or you want to run a TV or something full time, you're going to probably need more power. So really consider that with what you choose. So you may actually have to build out a system for that, or there are some brands out there putting out even bigger batteries than this. Overall, I think this system is just so easy to use. To me, it feels like the Apple of the solar power world. It just works easily and it's simplistic, well designed, and well thought out. Well, that wraps up the review. I hope you learned something, and if you have any further questions on anything related to these, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can and try to answer your question. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Jackery is going to be doing a Christmas sale on these from December 7th to the 13th. So that'll be a really good time to pick these up at a discount if you're interested in picking them up. And I do ask, if you do that, I have affiliate links in the description and in the comments of the video. So if you buy through those, either through Jackery or Amazon, I'll get a kickback and it'll keep these videos coming and keep us on the road traveling, which I would greatly appreciate. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the road somewhere.